What is critical to understand is that we have lost awareness of the plan, and that is the power of our habit brain system. So when we exit the car, as you've heard from Ali's father, we have not only lost awareness of the plan, we've created a false memory that if we're at work, we must have accomplished the plan. Our child must be at daycare. And we carry with us that false memory throughout the entire day. And so that's how we have to understand how these brain systems interact. And so, as has been mentioned already, we have warnings built into our cars, a warning that our door is open, that our trunk is open, that our headlights are on. And think about the circumstance in which you're driving during the day in which it is bright out and it starts raining and you put your headlights on. When you drive and then get to your destination, you have lost awareness that your headlights are on. And what do we have built in? Because leaving your headlights on, eventually you can have a dead battery. So we have built into the car a reminder that your headlights are on or they go off automatically. And so that takes into account the flaws in how our brain functions. And so the low-tech approach, which I emphasize to people, is we need to have a reminder. If that reminder is as simple as taking a toy out of the car seat when you put your child in and put it in the front where it's in view, it'll tell you on this drive, you get that reminder cue that says your child is in the car. And we need that reminder cue. Now that depends on the parent doing something, accepting that the parent or caretaker can forget their child. What is so much more important is we need an automated system to help us with these flaws in how our brain function. It is so important that the Hot Cars Act passed to take into account that we have flaws in how our brain functions. These flaws are more powerful than the love we have for our children. And so it is essential that the Hot Cars Act pass so we have automatic material, automatic equipment that is in our car that will detect if our child is in the car and we have forgotten when we arrive at our destination. Thank you for including me today.
Thanks, Dr. Diamond. Thank you for explaining a really complicated process to something that's very relatable. I think that it's safe to say no one gets into their car thinking they're going to get into a crash. And that's why we have seatbelts and airbags. Similarly, no one gets into a car thinking that they're going to forget their child. And that's why this technology is vital and it's inexpensive and this bill needs to pass so we can make that happen. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Norm Collins. Dr. Collins lives in Charleston, South Carolina. He lost his grandson, Norman Lee Van Collins III, known as Bishop, on May 29th, 2011, at only 3 months old after a miscommunication between Bishop's father and a fellow churchgoer about who was bringing the baby into church. Dr. Collins, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Kathy. Thank you so much. On May 29, 2011, it is a date that is etched in the chronicles of time in our hearts for me and my family. It is the day when I received a phone call from a church friend who informed me that my son, Norman II, needed me to come to Clarksdale, Mississippi, my hometown, right away because something had happened to my 3-month-old grandson, Norman Collins III, who was affectionately known as Bishop. After several more frantic phone calls, I eventually received word that our dear beloved Bishop was dead, the victim of a heat stroke after being unknowingly left in his parents' hot car in a church parking lot on a 93-degree Sunday afternoon, all due to a miscommunication. Grief-stricken, all I remember was the pain in my heart not felt by me since I witnessed the death of my mother 10 years earlier. The daily horror that I and my family encountered at the thought of Bishop buckled in his car seat, crying relentlessly, sweating profusely, seizing uncontrollably, and extending his little arms for help with no one to attend to him. At times, it is simply too much to bear for any human. As one would imagine, the days since Bishop's death have not been easy, but they've yielded several positives, including bringing to the forefront the need to build awareness and prevention of child safety in and around cars. Yes, Bishop's death was tragic, and it was unintentional. It was the result of confusion and misunderstanding between two people. Many people don't understand that a simple miscommunication can result in the death of a child in a hot car. Sometimes dad and mom bring the baby into the house from the car and vice versa. If either person thinks the baby is napping in their crib, it can be too late before the ramifications of a simple miscommunication are found. In our tragedy, the person who was asked to take the baby into the child care center at the church had misunderstood the communication. It wasn't until after services had ended and his parents went to pick him up from the church's daycare were the ramifications of that simple miscommunication known. I have thought so many times how inexpensive and effective technology would have saved our dear Bishop and countless others. Living with this hole in our heart is only deeper or deepened because we know it's totally preventable. Life would have been so different today for our entire family if we would have received an alert that precious little Bishop had been left in the car. This year, we would be celebrating his 10th birthday rather than commemorating his untimely death on Memorial Day weekend. For this reason, we call upon our lawmaking government officials to assist in the effort by supporting and passing the Hot Cars Act to save lives and avoid any more families from having to endure the lifelong horror of grief that ours and so many other families have encountered due to the preventable tragedies of hot car deaths. Please help us turn our pain into power, our tragedy into triumph, and our agony into positive action. We all have a God-given right, a responsibility, and a reason to protect our children as well as each other. Whereas we cannot change what happened to our precious Bishop and the almost 1,000 children who have died from heat stroke since 1990, as advocates, parents, teachers, rescuers, and legislators, we must pass the Hot Cars Act immediately. I challenge each person here today and around the United States to help us by working together and pledge to never stop talking, to never stop raising awareness, and to never stop working to require technology in all vehicles to make hot car deaths a thing of the past. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Collins. I can tell you, we most certainly pledge and stand with you, but more importantly, we've got to stop asking you to come here and talk about the worst day of your life, the worst day of all of these families' lives. We've got to bring this bill over the finish line. I'd now like to show a short video so that you can see that this technology exists and works very effectively and would be extremely inexpensive if it required as standard equipment in new vehicles. So please watch the video with us. Thank you.
VIAR provides multi-functionality on a single chip platform, ensuring less complexity and lower costs with only one sensor. VIAR's solution delivers application-ready child presence detection. It classifies children and adults, identifying babies even under blankets, as well as monitoring footwells.
When a vehicle is turned off, the system waits for an adult to get out and retrieve the child. The radar sensor briefly activates, just long enough to detect anyone who might be there. Aptiv's sensor can even see through blankets to detect a child's breathing or pulse. Alternatively, we can use a camera, the same one used to monitor the driver's awareness, to identify a baby, pet, car seat, or other objects that might have been left behind. If the vehicle detects an infant, older child, or pet, it can take a number of actions. It can send a text or call a registered number, activate a car horn or alarm. And if the vehicle is electric, it could even switch on climate control to keep the cabin cool.
VitaSense is sensitive enough to detect the breathing of babies, even when they are sleeping. VitaSense is invisibly integrated in the vehicle behind the headliner, and it can trigger multiple warnings and notifications.
Attention. An unattended child has been detected.
Our life as men and white, and hardships then could scarcely scare us into quitting. Things were far from being fine. We often dine on a dime, but there never was a time we didn't.
This one.
I think those are some pretty poignant examples of how this technology can work. I'd now like to introduce our last speaker, Jeanette Fennell. Jeanette is the founder and president of Kids in Car Safety. Jeanette has dedicated decades to improving safety for children in and around vehicles. She is highway and auto safety. Jeanette, thank you so much for your leadership and for organizing today's event.
Thank you, Kathy. We really appreciate the fabulous job you did today in helping us better understand why these tragic incidents continue to happen. And I'm sure everybody did learn quite a bit today from our speakers, and they now are better able to understand how and why these tragedies continue to happen. The positive news is we just saw in this video montage the different available technologies that are so exciting, because you've just witnessed how these deaths and injuries can be prevented.
Jeanette, I don't mean to interrupt you. Sorry about that, but you're not on camera. There we go. Now you're on camera.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm not quite sure why that happened, but is this fine now?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, I was just saying how excited we were to be able to see these technologies, because now we know that there is technology there, and that is the answer to how we can end these deaths and injuries. You know, we do live in such an ever-changing world, and the 2020 pandemic taught us to learn how to do things differently. In fact, we are communicating via Zoom today because this is how we're doing business these days. While everyone was locked down last year, schools and childcare centers and many things were closed. So wouldn't you think that hot car deaths would end? Well, that did not happen. The number of deaths last year did go down to 25 from an average of 38, but it certainly shouldn't take a pandemic to prevent hot car deaths. While so many children were home last year, many of the hot car deaths were due to children getting into vehicles on their own. It is vital that any technology installed in vehicles can detect the presence of a child or pet if they are unknowingly left behind or gain access to a vehicle on their own. The Hot Cars Act will make that happen. It's really about utilizing and perfecting the resources we already have to save innocent lives. I know that you've heard from almost every speaker that since 1990, almost 1,000 children have died in hot cars. You know, that's not just a number. It's the suffering of hundreds of families and communities simply trying to endure the unimaginable. Take a moment, if you would, to imagine 1,000 children in front of you right now. Now, also imagine all of their parents, siblings, extended family members, caregivers, and loved ones. Now also think about all of the EMS workers, the police officers, doctors, nurses, and reporters who were directly impacted by their tragedies. This number becomes very exponential. What makes the pain cut even deeper is that we know there's solutions, and we know they can currently be applied to prevent these deaths. The other pandemic outcome that we have wrestled with this year is the importance of science in our world. How many people truly understand that one of the main reasons hot car deaths continue is simply has to do with brain science? We certainly wish we could train our memories to never forget, but this is a very human condition we all deal with. Dr. Diamond has studied how our memories work for over 40 years, and he is able to articulate exactly how and why this takes place. Nobody in the world has an infallible memory. This is not about bad parenting. This is not a crime. This is a public health issue that we all must work together to end. Safety is something every family deserves. It shouldn't be an option, and it shouldn't be political. The federal government, our legislators, automakers, along with safety advocates, and all our families have the ability to solve this problem. Yet our government and industry has shamefully remained complacent about the children who continue to die from something so utterly preventable. We need to make sure Congress mandates a detection and alarm system to save the lives of our children and eliminate that crushing pain that causes our families through no fault of their own. We know technology works. It's sitting on a shelf somewhere, waiting to save young lives. Today, technology saves your car battery. Tomorrow, it could save your child. What are we waiting for? I'd like to thank you for all joining us. We're now going to open it up for questions from the media. You can send your questions via the chat box or raise your hand and we will call on you so you can ask your question.
Right, we have a few questions in the chat box. The first one is from George Torres, and that is, when will the Hot Cars Act be reintroduced in the House, or has it already?
I can answer that. It actually has just been reintroduced today. In fact, as part of our materials, we are adding a copy of that language for everyone to review. So today's the day, and we're very happy about that. So thanks for that good question.
Okay, and we've got another one from Makia Wallace. Makia is the mother of a 21-month-old boy named Jace Leslie, who passed away in a hot car in September of last year. And her question is, what do you plan to do about vehicles that are already on the roadway today? Kids are being born every day, and this is an urgent matter. So what's going to happen with the vehicles that don't have the technology today?
Makia, thank you for that question, and we're so very sorry about your loss as well. The language in the Hot Cars Act will take care of that particular issue. The way it reads is that the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration would be tasked with looking at available technologies that are currently an aftermarket product. They will test and they will find out which products really work as promised, as well as put that on their website and let everyone know. So we have thought about that because we want technology and prevention designs to be out there as soon as possible, but we want to make sure that they work. So as per language in the Hot Cars Act, it will require require our government to test existing systems and let you know which ones work the best so you can make your decisions based on that information.
Thank you, Jeanette. The next question, we've gotten this from a few people. Who's pushing back against the legislation and why?
Well, Kathy, you want to take that one? I see you took your...
Yeah, I'd be glad to take that. I touched upon it during my remarks. Unfortunately, the auto industry always pushes back against any type of regulation because they would rather do it voluntarily. But we know, without a doubt, that any type of voluntary industry agreement is not effective. First of all, it's voluntary. Second of all, companies can walk away from it at any time. There's no mechanism that requires them to do so. Third point is that there's no minimum performance standard when there's a voluntary agreement. So you can have a fantastic system, or you can have a system that's inadequate and doesn't accomplish it. And what's really terrifying about the inadequate systems is that parents think they're doing the right thing or think that they have the technology that will prevent this from happening, and they rely on it. And then the technology doesn't perform as needed. So that is why this bill is so essential. We can't rely on voluntary agreements. We can't rely on the industry just saying, trust us, we can get this done. We need this legislation so that the U.S. Department of Transportation is required to issue a rule that states companies must get this into new vehicles, and they must do it by a date certain, meaning it cannot go on indefinitely. It needs to happen expediently, because with every passing day, there's a risk of another child dying in a hot car.
I think that's a great answer to that question. And it is really important for people to understand the difference between something that's voluntary and something that is required by law. And I know the automakers are talking about a voluntary agreement that they've set forward, but unfortunately it does not detect the presence of a child. And it does nothing to let us know if a child's got in a vehicle on their own. So that's why common sense, straightforward language that we have in the Hot Cars bill is so necessary.
Thank you, Jeanette and Kathy. We got another questions, a couple more coming through. Can you provide an update on what the changes have been from the last legislative session to this one with the Hot Cars Act?
Well, it's not that different. And the other thing I want to make sure everybody knows is last year, the Hot Cars Act did make it all the way through the full House. So we're hoping to repeat that performance again this year as quickly as possible. But the language just has been refined a little bit and made it perfectly clear what the expectations are. But the key thing that people really need to understand about this bill is we need to be able to detect the presence of a child or a pet that's been left alone in a vehicle, or if they get in on their own. And those are the ways the children die, and we can prevent that. And that's what the language of this bill does.
Thank you. Is there anything we can do to help encourage the passing of the bill?
Oh, that's the best question I've ever had an opportunity to answer. Yes, yes, and yes. We need everybody to get involved. And if you can contact your members of Congress, have your neighbors and your friends, and everybody, let the people in Washington, D.C. know that this is important. This should have been done years ago. And this is going to be our year. So if everyone works together and lets our Congress people know that this is so important to you, I think we can make this happen.
Great. Do you have a automotive technology that you prefer, whether that's from an automaker or a supplier?
We are never prescriptive in the language and the intent of bills that we write. It really has to fit more of a performance standard. And that standard is you have to be able to detect the presence of a child if they're alone in a vehicle or if they get in. I see Kathy also unmuted her microphone, so I think she has something to say about this as well.
Yeah, Jeanette, thanks. I thought we could give an example of a recent victory that we shared in rearview cameras. Similarly to hot cars, the rearview camera bill that was enacted did not prescribe any type of technology. Rather, it said auto manufacturers have to meet certain minimum performances, as Jeanette mentioned. And we are very pleased that that victory, albeit took way too long to happen, has resulted in every new car now has rearview cameras. Just like just like younger people now can't imagine a day when cars didn't have seatbelts or airbags. In the future, someday people will think there was a time when cars didn't have rearview cameras, and all of us will remember that day. And we're looking forward to the day when people will think there was a time when cars didn't have reminders and alert systems for children. It's absurd and it needs to end. And that's why we need to bring this legislation over the finish line. As Jeanette mentioned, the House passed it last year. We're pleased to announce the reintroduction of the bill this year and expect it to move forward in both the House and the Senate, and look forward to, as Congressman Ryan said, President Biden signing this into law.
Okay, we've got another question from Michael Strong. Ford, Nissan, Kia, Hyundai, GM, and others all have some form of a warning system in place currently. Are these systems adequate?
Well, I'll answer that very easily. The answer is no. There is a system which we're happy to have out there because it certainly is better than nothing. But how it works is if you open your back door before you take off on your journey, when you arrive, you will get a warning that says, check the rear seats. And that's excellent. But it doesn't detect if there's a child. You're going to get that same warning if you put a box of Kleenexes in the back seat. You're going to get that same warning anytime you open the back door before you leave. Now, there's some problems with that. So let's say you put your child in your vehicle and you're on your way to work and you're going to drop them at childcare before you get to work. Let's say you stop for a cup of coffee, or let's say you go through and decide, I need some gas, I better fill up on my way to work. Well, you stop, you turn off your vehicle, you fill up your tank, and then you leave. Well, you think that there's going to be technology there to help remind you if your child's been left behind, but you won't receive a reminder because if you don't open that door within 10 minutes of leaving on your journey, it won't kick in. But more importantly, it does nothing to tell us if a child has entered a vehicle on their own. And that's clearly over 1/4 of the deaths that we've documented every year. So the other part I need to answer of your question is there are some technologies in the Hyundai and the Kia, certain models, that does go and take that next step. They have some ultrasonic sensors that can detect if a child's been left behind. So they've taken that extra step before they were even required to do so. So hats off to them, but we still need very, very much to get this Hot Car Act passed and every vehicle to have this technology installed right away.
Jeanette, if I could add to that, the fact that some of these car manufacturers are putting the different technologies into cars is evidence that this can happen and that it can happen inexpensively. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. So that's why this legislation is so critical. Additionally, the car manufacturers right now, while some may be putting them into cars in these model years, maybe next model year they'll opt not to. And that's why the legislation is critical. Additionally, right now, some of the technologies are in different packages, or you can't just purchase it a la carte, if you will. And not every family can afford to buy different bells and whistles on their cars. Not that this technology is a bells and whistles, it's most certainly is not, but maybe it's bundled with a heated steering wheel or, a higher end package. And that really goes to an issue of equity. Not only people who have the extra budget to purchase these should be afforded the benefits of these technologies. Everyone should get it. And that's why it needs to be standard equipment in all cars.
Thank you, Kathy. That's a very good point. All children deserve the same protections. We have a question from Michael Budo, probably said that wrong, about the Evenflo sensor-safe car seat technology. And I'd like to answer that one, actually. He's asking, do we recommend it? And if there are other products on the market right now that parents can buy. I actually used the Evenflo car seat personally with my son about 4 years ago when he was born. And I was really surprised to find that after a few short weeks of hearing the audio alert, let me take a step back. So the Evenflo car seat, for those of you who don't know, has a chest clip. And when that chest clip is buckled, meaning that there's a child in the car seat, the car seat connects with your vehicle and provides a nice little soft musical chime to remind you to check the back seat when you turn the car off. And after a few short weeks of using that car seat, I would have people get in my car and ask me what that noise was when I turned the car off. I didn't hear it anymore. It went off every single time I parked, and it became, background noise. I just completely stopped hearing it. And having just an alert that's audio like that is very concerning. Just kind of like with backup sensors, when you have them going off all the time, you tend to drown out that noise. And then, Jeanette, do you want to answer the part about other products on the market?
Well, I do think that the Evenflo product is something that is a step you can take right now, so it can help remind people. So, I want to make sure people understand that it's out there, it's available, and it is a good reminder. We're trying to get reminders in vehicles. It will take longer with the Hot Cars Act because that's not going to happen next year. It's going to take a little while for that to be installed in vehicles. But that's also why we have the language in the Hot Cars Act to make sure that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration will test all the different systems to see what works best. But, I would say until we get this bill passed and it's in all vehicles, we all need to be aware of this. Always look before you lock. If there's any technology that's available, try to install it. A lot of people talk about the fact that on the Waze app, when you arrive at your destination, it can remind you to check the back seat. Again, that's a nice reminder, but I don't know about you. On my way to work, I don't usually set Waze because I do know how to get there. So there's pluses and minuses for everything, but the answer is the Hot Cars Act. So let's get that done just as quickly as possible.
Definitely. We like to refer to those, right, Jeanette, as a layer of protection, but not something to be relied on completely. Having some layers is always important. We've got another question. Does the bill cover the luggage space in the back of a hatchback, or only the rear seat area is covered for detection with the bill?
I'm going to guess that is a question probably specific to SUVs. And it's my understanding for most of the technologies, they can cover up to 2 or 3 rows in a vehicle. I don't know the answer to the actual, back of an SUV, but we can certainly find out that answer. But my understanding is it really is just the first 2 rows or 3 rows, and that includes the floorboards.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Jeanette, also, you're correct, and it covers the vehicle. And then that determination will probably be worked out by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration when they're conducting their rulemaking. So there's, the bill language is pretty clear in saying it covers the entire vehicle, and then some of the details will be worked out during the rulemaking process.
Right, and I can tell you from our extensive database it is very rare, if at all, that children have been found in that area. Probably the most prominent place that children are found in these situations, if they've gotten in on their own or gotten out of their car seat, is in the floorboard area of either the front or the back seat, and that would be covered.
All right, that's all the questions we have right now. If anybody has another question, please submit it.
Well, I do want to thank everybody for joining us today. And we will be issuing a press release. It will include links to a lot of information about the issue of hot cars. It will also have the language for the Hot Cars Act. And as always, anytime you have questions or need to have specific data or information, we're here for you. But we want everyone to work together to put an end to these terrible tragedies. And again, thank you to our incredibly brave and special families. You're our inspiration. Thank you.